This morning is a very, very important morning. People will be aware that there is a Royal Commission into abuse, child abuse, particularly in institutional settings, that's been conducted across Australia. And many of you would know that many people with disabilities have suffered abuse at an early age. The Royal Commissioner, Robert Fitzgerald, is one of 6 commissioners for the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. And Commissioner Fitzgerald has lots of experience in defending and promoting the rights of people with disability. And Robert and the Commission is hearing in Melbourne at the moment. They're very, very busy. But Robert contacted Valid and asked for the opportunity to come and talk to you guys to make sure that the message about abuse was being heard by people with disabilities. And even though there are not a lot of people in the room this morning, we're going to be videoing this, and we're going to be asking you to take the video back into your organisations across the country to make sure that this message is spread far and wide. So I'd like you to join me in welcoming Commissioner Robert Fitzgerald.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to be able to talk about the work of the Royal Commission this morning. And it's a great joy to be here at this Valid conference, a conference that's very important, and it's about a conference for very important people, which are yourselves. I'm one of the 6 commissioners in the Royal Commission. And there we are. I'll just go back a bit. And we've been appointed by the Australian government to conduct this inquiry into child sexual abuse when people were children in an institutional context or an institutional environment. And I'm here to speak about the work that we do, but most importantly, why we want to hear from you and other people that have experienced or know of experience of people that were abused as children. The Royal Commission is looking at child sexual abuse, and we want to know why child sexual abuse occurred in particular settings. We know that it happens in families and in the community, but we're looking at it in relation to organisations and institutions. Child sexual abuse is when somebody touches a child on their bottom, or their breasts, or their penis, or their vagina, without their permission. It happens when, more often than not, an adult tries to exert power or control over an individual and forces them to do things that are wrong in relation to their body and in relation to sexual activity. It's when somebody forces a child to do something that they don't wish to do. And we've seen many examples of that already in the Royal Commission. And it can happen in lots of places, in schools, in disability services, in residential care, in group homes, in hospitals, in day services, on camps overnight, and sometimes even in the workplace, even in work centres that you might attend. And these are the institutions that we're looking at, the sorts of institutions that you as children would have attended, and today many, many, many hundreds of children with disabilities currently attend. Our job is to listen to people's stories of sexual abuse. If you were sexually abused as a child, we're here to listen to your story. Your story is very important to us. The only way we can do our work is when we hear from people that were abused, or from their parents, or from their brothers and sisters, or from other workers who knew of that abuse that was taking place. And I've talked to many people like you about their lives and what happened to them. People have shared their stories And many of them tell us that they have felt better about doing that. By telling us, the Royal Commission, about their stories, they feel better about themselves. They know that someone important has listened to them and can do something about that. We are interested in other staff members and carers that know of the abuse that took place. Because with people with disabilities, some, like yourselves, are able to come forward directly, but many are not. Many are not verbal or don't have the skills to be able to express their stories, but others do and can do so on their behalf. We also know that the story must be confidential. That is, we respect the fact that that's your story. And when you tell us your story, we won't tell anyone else about that story without your permission. It's your life, it's your story, it's your experience. But unless people come forward to tell us of those experiences, we don't know. Speaking up can be hard. We understand that. We know that when children and young people, and even adults with disabilities, told people that they were abused, sometimes they weren't believed. We know that when children went forward and told adults that they were being abused, sometimes they were told that that could not have happened. It could not be true. And that increased the pain for those that were abused. But we at the Royal Commission will believe you. And we will believe you because we have now heard from so many people. We've heard from over 3,000 people who have come forward to tell us their story. And we now understand the nature of the abuse that took place. And we do believe that people were abused, and we will believe you. And that is our job. One of the processes we use is a private session. And a private session is where you, together with a carer or a support worker, a friend, a family member, can come and sit around a round table somewhere in Melbourne or anywhere else around Australia and talk to somebody like myself, a commissioner, and one of our other legal officers, and just in a small room tell us about that story. We work hard to make sure that this is a safe place to tell your story. We understand that sometimes it doesn't feel safe to tell these stories. But we are here to do that, to do it in a safe way. We try to make it comfortable. And we allow support people to be present with you. And we have counsellors and other people on site that can support you as well. And now we have run these private sessions around Australia, in every capital city, including here in Melbourne, and in some regional centres. And we've been doing this work now for 2 years. But we will be doing this for another 3 years. So even if you're not ready yet to come forward and talk to us, we will be here for another 2 to 3 years to listen to those stories. I've already spoken to many people with disabilities that have come forward. About 20% of all people that have come to the Royal Commission have some form of disability now. Not necessarily when they were children, but now. But I've also spoken to people that had disabilities when they were children. I had a young boy, he's only 19 or 20 now, with autism, who was abused both in a church and in a work centre. And he came with his parents. And he can't speak, but he could type into a particular machine. And he told his story of abuse. I had a woman come to me who had a physical disability. And she was abused as a child in a particular health centre where she had to go to seek treatment. And she was abused by one of the workers there. And she came forward and told her story. And I had a boy, a young man, who was abused in Adelaide, who was one of many children with disabilities, intellectual disabilities, who was abused at a school by a woodwork teacher and who was also the bus driver. And he came forward and he spoke of what happened to him and the impacts on his life. And he later gave evidence in one of our public hearings, the ones you see on television. And he was a strong, powerful person giving his story not only to us privately, but he chose to do it in a public way as well. So people are coming forward, and so too are their parents and their carers, their supporters and their friends and their family members. You don't have to do it through a private session. You can write it. You can tell us on the telephone. Yes, you can come in person, and you can always do this with support. And if you don't have support, we will help provide that support if that's necessary. So I want you to be sure that in fact it is safe to come to us, and we will make it as easy as possible, even though we understand how hard it is to tell the story. But we just don't want to hear the story. We want to use your story for a number of reasons. We want to use your stories to help us understand how to make places safer into the future. We want to make sure children with disabilities, whether it's intellectual disabilities, whether it's physical disabilities, whether it's disabilities associated with mental health issues, we want them to be in safe places. You help us understand and make decisions about that. We also want to make sure that people that have done the wrong thing are brought to justice. And so we refer to the police lots and lots of people who are alleged to have abused people. We also want to make sure that the organisations where this abuse took place provide justice to those that were abused. And we look at issues around those institutions providing some redress, some sort of assistance to people that have been abused, providing apologies where it's appropriate. And we will be producing papers and reports that talk about those issues. We also use research. We also are talking to disability advocacy groups like Valid, like People with Disabilities, like many other organisations here. And we're speaking to those people so that they can help us understand not only what happened, but what we need to do into the future. But most importantly, you will give us the answers. A safe place to work, a safe place to play, a safe place to live. That's what we want to achieve out of this Royal Commission. And whilst we are talking about children who have been abused, we know that our work will affect institutions that also provide services to people that are adults. And so in the new world of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, in the new creation of services, both for children and adults, we hope our work will help them create safer and better environments for all people, including people with disabilities. We need your support to create those. This conference is about speaking out. You are important people with important messages. We need to hear that, and the Australian community needs to hear that. Your voice matters, and it matters now, because now is the time that we can actually make the difference. We can make a difference for children in the past and those that were abused in the, children into the future and those that were abused into the past. So we want to hear, and there are details available which you can get from whilst you're here at this conference about how to approach us. We have staff here at this conference, Davina and Julie, who will be around today and tomorrow to talk to you, and the organisers can put you in touch with those particular people. And those that are advocates, those that are carers and supporters, we want to hear from you as well. But you don't have to, and nobody is compelling you to do anything. And if you choose not to come forward to talk to us, that's okay. It's your life, it's your experience, you make the decisions, not us. But if you do wish to, that's important. So now, I'm happy to take some questions, if we want to, about what I've spoken about. We will be looking at different institutions as we go through. So some of you would be aware that we had a public hearing into St Anne's, a disability school in Adelaide, where there was abuse. We're looking at other institutions where there has been abuse, but we will be only able to look at a small number of those. We know that there were many other places where abuse took place, but the work we're doing will help inform all institutions, not just those that we have public hearings about. So if you want to come to the Commission, if you have information you think we need to know, if you have a story you wish to tell us, then please do so. And over the next 3 years, we will continue to develop policies, we will continue to develop recommendations, we will continue to discuss with governments and non-government institutions, all with the purpose of creating justice for those that were abused, but also creating a safer environment for children into the future. So thank you for inviting me, and now I'm happy to take some questions. Now, who wants to ask a question whilst we're still here?
They've got roving mics on either side here, okay?
Hello. My question is, has there ever been a survey done of children who have been sexually abused? Like, is it a like a stable level of both those with disabilities and non-disabilities, or is it more than the other that have been abused?
Thank you. One of the things we're trying to do is to work out what they call the prevalence or the incidence of sexual abuse. And we do not know with any precision whether or not abuse amongst people with disabilities is greater than those without. We do not know that. But what we have been doing is talking to people in institutions and advocacy groups and in governments such as the Disability Commissioners and the Ombudsman around to try to understand a little bit more about that. The point that I make is this: it is likely that abuse would have been higher because the institutions that we're talking about were closed. Very few people knew what was happening in those institutions. Most of the people in the institutions were vulnerable because of the disabilities or other reasons. They were also very much under the control of the staff. And the power imbalance, the difference between the power of staff and the power of the child, whether they have disabilities or not, is a very important issue. So all of the factors that I've talked about would lead us to the view that people with disabilities probably were abused at a greater rate. But no, we don't have concrete evidence. But if you just think about it for a moment, you would expect that. But the last point, the most important, is many people with disabilities would never have reported it. Either because at the time they may not have been aware that it was abuse. They may be unsure what was happening to them. Many children talk to us that they're not sure about what happened. They didn't understand sex. They didn't understand what was good and bad. Later in life, they understood that. So in that environment, people that want to abuse children probably knew that children wouldn't report it, and that would have encouraged some to do it. The point I make is the majority of children with disabilities in institutions were not abused and are not abused in society, but many were. Many were. And now, as adults, we hope that many of those people will come forward directly or through advocates or other people. Yes, anywhere? Somebody's got the mic.
Hello.
Hello.
Jane, you remember me?
I do. How are you?
Good, and how are you?
I'm terrific.
Yeah, and it's good seeing you again.
I didn't get to Red Faces last night, and I'm
No.
not getting to the disco tonight, so you're going to miss out on me looking very splendid, but I'm here.
Thank you. Now, I'm one of them that's actually been to the Royal Commission in Melbourne, and it was last year, and that was through Open Place. Mm-hmm. It was. Open Place is an organisation for people who've been in institutions, and like they helped a lot of people out on trying to go to the Royal Commission if they wanted to, and the people who were at the Royal Commission like last year, but they are this year, but they got a motel and they asked the people if they would like to go to the motel, and you've got a room on your own and you've got the guys here and they ask for your permission if they want to tape you. You can say yes or no, and you can have a friend with you, you can, or your family member. And you can, you know, it is hard, very hard, because it was hard for me too. And I was upset, crying and that, and like I just told them what I told my other lawyers about what happened in the institution with me from when I was 6 months old and like over 6 months, but it was from 5 years old until 16. That's what happened 3 times. And they helped me out and that, and there was more that came back to me on when one of the nuns died, who I went to a funeral with. More memories came back from that, which happened to me, but not in a sexual way, but in physical way. Sure. It did. And that's what I'd like to try and do is like to help with the Royal Commission on the people who want to come forward. There'll be leaflets. Would there be leaflets?
There are leaflets, yes.
Yes, and if anyone would like to pick up a leaflet, the number's on there, the email's on there, and you can even do it at home on the phone if you don't want to go out and that. So they are really trustworthy people, they are.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's good. And no, I didn't pay her to say that.
I live in a issue with someone with a disability under me, physically abused me a couple of days, and I done that weeks, and that did not leave me.
Yes, that's right. We've heard from a number of people that were physically abused and sexually abused, and when they told other people, they were not believed. And that is a huge problem.
That happened to me.
And as you say, it happened to you, and it happened to many others. We need to change that so that into the future, when people come forward who are young people and they report physical or sexual abuse, then people will at least accept their story and investigate that properly. But even today, as adults, some people won't believe you. And our point is that the Royal Commission now has heard from so many people. We are able to accept and believe the stories that people tell you. And the good news is that the police and others in the community are starting to accept what people say more than they did in the past. And in this area, that we have a long way and a lot of work to do with the police in Victoria and around Australia. But I am sure that the work of the Royal Commission will mean that when people come forward and tell their story, people in authority, such as police and others, will listen and investigate. I'm sure of that.
Yeah.
Take one more. Okay. I just need to take...
That bitch don't have fast iron.
Sorry?
Can I just make a comment here? I just need to...
The bitch have done that to me, not alive now me.
Mate, during the break, we should have let people know that there are counsellors available to talk to people who would like to talk privately and confidentially. So after this session, make sure you go and have a chat with someone and talk to them about it then, okay? Now, they'll be out at the front at the registration desk with the Royal Commissioners. I need to be respectful of the Commissioner here. He does need to get off to a hearing in Melbourne. So maybe one more question, please. Over here.
Good morning, Robert, and thank you for your results of the investigation, which are long overdue. You tapped into a point there, and so did the young man down the front, about the vulnerability of people when we have a staff imbalance.
Yes.
And of course this has become very obvious in residential units where you have that same situation occurring. And my question was going to be, yes, how is it going to be handled when people make a complaint through an advocate and whatever? Are we going to see changes in the way it is handled and people get that chance to tell their story, and the staff imbalance? Because often you have one staff member there a night by themselves with 5 people. How does that sort of play out?
A couple of things about that. The first thing is that in many of the states around Australia today, there are community visitor and other visitor programs that are operating within residential services for people with disabilities. And that's proven to be very important because people, residents, young people or adults, are able to tell their story to those people in a way that they may not have been able to tell others. The second thing is now that there's a lot more advocacy for people with disabilities who can tap into people such as ombudsmen and disability commissioners and others around Australia. But the third thing is actually making sure that the institution itself is what we call child safe. And we're going to be doing a number of roundtables in relation to different institutions, working with children's commissioners and others to try to create a blueprint so that a disability service providing services for children with disabilities actually creates that safe environment. That is about the way you select staff. It's about the way you supervise staff. It's about the way you construct an environment where early inappropriate behaviour is identified and acted upon. It is about trying to change the imbalance, but always we recognise that people in residential services, particularly people with disabilities, there will always be some imbalance in those places. And so we have to create those safeguards. And I know that the NDIS, which is a brand new model, and you're going to be talking about that, is actively considering a safeguards framework because we're conscious of it. So all I can say at this stage is we are absolutely aware of and determined to try to create safe environments, including disability services, including disability residential services. But I do want to be positive to say there have been improvements over recent years in the ways that I've now described, and I think that they will be strengthened into the future. What I want to say is I know, and you know, we cannot completely stop child sexual abuse, but we can reduce it and reduce the risk of it. What we can do is to make it safer for people to report it if it happens, to support them and to create a much better response, not only in terms of supporting them through counselling, but also through ensuring that they receive a just response. So it's not only creating a safe environment, but it's also responding if something goes wrong. Okay.
Thank you,
Robert.
Good. Good. Thank you very much, yes. Robert, on behalf of VALID and the local organising committee, can I present you with this book on the Great Ocean Road and a sample of our wares down this way? And again, thank you very much for making the effort.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.